So when did you go missing, and why was it good you had your address? I actually went missing once too, but I forgot to get off the bus. And the bus driver had a first grader left over. I've got one too many kids here. Where do you live? I don't know. But I always moved all the time.
This was in the early 60s, and I was still living in Washington, D.C. And has anyone ever grown up, you know, we all know the ice cream man, right? Does everybody know the ice cream man? Do you know the balloon man?
No.
Okay. In our neighborhood, we had a balloon man. And he would, and our street was like a hill. So you would come up and go down our street. And I would see the balloons before I saw him. And when every kid was running after the ice cream man, I wanted a balloon. They were like 5 cents. And I'd see him coming. The balloons would come first, and he'd come over the hill. And I would just be like this, you know, like I want a balloon. Now, understand, I was 3 years old. 3. And somehow, my sisters were supposed to be watching me. Now, I look at that now and say, how is that possible when one of them was 4 and the other one was 6? But that's beside the point. So we're outside, right? And apparently, I'm 3, apparently, I started to follow him. And they weren't paying attention. And I always say it's because they never let me play. You know how you say, can I jump with you guys? No, you're too small. Can I play hopscotch? No, you don't know how to count. Can I, you know, so you would just be sitting there at 3 years old like this, upset. So I followed the balloon man. And then all of a sudden I was noticed missing and nobody could find me. My mother freaks all the way out. Well, my father's a firefighter, so he calls the fire department, then he calls the police department, so everybody's out looking for me. And they looked in the washing machines and the dryers and the basement. They had all the teenagers looking for me. Everybody knew me. I was a little mischievous, but I ended up in another neighborhood. And a woman saw me. And she said, who does that child belong to? I've never seen that child before. So she went up to the balloon man, thinking I might be with him, and he turned and he said, you know what? She is from another neighborhood. I see her all the time. Now, this is the story that was told to me. I'm 3. I'm going to tell y'all right now. I don't remember this happening. And the woman asked me my name and where I lived. And she said, I looked up at her just as sweet and said, my name is Wanda Alexis Alexander, and my address is 2117 I Street Northeast, apartment 10. You want my phone number? Every time I hear that story, I crack up because I don't have any memory of it. But my mother says everyone's outside on the sidewalk when the police car drives up. And in the back seat, depending on who you ask, I was sucking on a lollipop or eating a pickle. Depends on who tells the story. But I know I wasn't doing both. And I had my balloon. And so the moral to the story is, never take your eyes off the balloon man. Never take your eyes off the prize, because eventually you will get it. I came home with a balloon. The rest of that story didn't matter to me. I got what I went for. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, it tells you a lot about who you are as a person today.
Oh my gosh.
So tell us about, it came time for your silver box.
Mm-hmm.
Where did you go to school? What did you want to do? What was your education about for you? I mean, was it like, I can't wait to go, I want to go, or I have to go? What was it for you?
It wasn't I'm ready to go, have to go. It was like, I'm number 3, the first 2 went, I better go. I mean, I'm going to be honest. And I thought, you know, I don't know what I want to do. I don't have a clue. I just know I've been a good student, because I had to be a good student. I lived, by that time, in Lakewood Street in Suitland. We moved when I was 7. And you didn't come home with bad grades, unacceptable. You are smarter than that. You know, they watch you, they looked at your homework. You know, my mother had to look at our homework. Oh my gosh, she was I'm very much like her. And she would look at it and say, you know, I know you can do better than that. I just know you can, so I just want you to go do it again. If you came home and you didn't have homework, they had 3 sets of encyclopedias in my house. I think it's because my parents didn't know how to say no when people came to your door selling stuff. 3 sets. And so you'd come home and you wouldn't have homework, and Mom would say, you don't have any homework? I'm like, no, ma'am, I didn't have homework today. Go downstairs and get the encyclopedia, get P. And write me a report on potatoes. So you learn to make up homework. I mean, after a while, you figured it out. You're like, we're not doing this. And so education was a big key. It was always there. You know, you always had to go to different camps in the summertime. And then my father would sit down and tell you African American history, true story. And he would tell you these stories, and I'd be like this at my father. I ain't read that in no book, nowhere. Where are you getting that from? The reality is a lot of what he taught us has now been made into television movies, have now been taught about. It wasn't taught when I was a kid. It wasn't in the books. But my father had this amazing memory, and he would just sit and tell you these stories, and you would go, okay, Dad, whatever. And as an adult, it just hit me like, oh my God, this man was telling the truth the whole time. He also knew his history very well. So I know my history on my father's side. I'm learning the history on my mother's side. So they come from this long line of storytellers. And so education, I went to University of Maryland in College Park. And every school that I had on my list, I didn't get in because my scores weren't that high. So I went to Maryland and just had a party. I mean, you mean there's nobody here to say get up? What? You know, I had a ball in college. Seriously, I still hang out with my friends. We just had a retreat last weekend that went to college with me in the 70s. We had a ball. But I realized you really shouldn't compromise your education for a good time, because you got a whole lot of time after that to have a good time. So they kicked me out in my junior year. And I didn't know what academic probation was. What is that? You know, I got an A in that class. What's up? But it was because I dropped classes. You know, I get in the middle of the class and go, this is just, I'm not feeling this. And so I'm just not coming back. Not realizing that they treat that like an F. Yeah. So here I get this notice, and it says, we no longer want you here. We're freeing you up for new opportunities, which I use for my staff now. But anyway. I go home, and my mother, I tell you, my mother's job was with the district government, and she made sure that women on welfare were educated. They had an amazing program called Work Incentive, so that was her job. And then she was promoted as a contract specialist. And so what she would do is go through Virginia, Maryland, and DC and talk to different corporations and companies and convince them to hire these women after they got trained. And the government paid half their salary for a year, and the company would pay the other half. And then after a year, if that employee was good and you wanted to keep them, you had to pay their full salary. That was a job my mother did until she died. Got amazing stories about her. Anyway, I find it very amazing, like a continuation of her amazing life, that I now get to employ women. And I also have assisted women on welfare and young people in our area, metro area, who just needed an additional leg up. You know, they may come from, I've seen some stories that blew my mind and realized my mother went through this a lot, to the point where people stood up at her funeral and spoke about how she would show up at their house when they didn't show up in class and say, why aren't you there? And I couldn't find a babysitter. All right, well, I'm here. So you need to go and get on the bus and go to class. I don't have bus fare. Okay, here's some bus fare. Before you leave, what's that child's name? And that one, okay. And these are the stories these people told at my mother's funeral. I had no clue, none. My mother did not come home and talk about her job. She didn't come home and talk about any of these women. And fast forward to 2010, and I'm speaking at the GSA's Women's History Month in DC, and I talk about my mom and her job, and I talk about my dad. Y'all around me long enough, some people in here know, I can't function without talking about them. They sit here and here. And this woman comes up to me after the presentation, and I'm going to try not to get weepy.
But you can't.
And she said to me, I knew your mother. And I did like this, and she said, 33 years ago, I was on welfare with 2 children. And I went through that program. And your mother got me a job here at GSA for the summer. And she said after the summer, my job was over and I didn't know what I was going to do. And they called me back. And I have been here for 33 years thanks to your mother. I have had some of the best moments in my life, but that one right there, woo!
You know, I think that that's so powerful, is to understand, and your mother's behavior, certainly your parents obviously created this foundation for a family that's extraordinary, you and your siblings. Mm-hmm. But I think it's also telling, when we share that, how you in your life can impact in a moment somebody else's life. And I always remember that. I always try to think, in this moment, even if I'm having a bad day and I cross somebody's path, I always try to share a kindness, a thought. If I need somebody struggling for $1, and one time I was behind a woman who had food stamps when I was in a grocery store, and she didn't have the money to buy the food. And I don't share that with you because it's not about me, but it's the fact that I had a few extra dollars. And the guy was there going to say, I'm sorry, I can't help you. And I said, what's the balance? And it wasn't, but it's in that moment of kindness. And I always think, for a moment, somebody knew somebody else cared. Mm-hmm. Maybe some children were fed. I mean, it wasn't like she was buying the best potatoes. She was buying not the best, you know, that were on sale potatoes. And I thought, we have an obligation in this world to share our abundance at any moment, and whether or not it's to share an opportunity. And if you can, you always should, because it's a path that changed this woman's life. Because what if your mother had not crossed her path?